Thomas Hastings. And this architect, I postponed making a presentation about him for some time, but today I decided to change. So, Thomas Hastings, 1860-1929. This was the man. It was very hard to find pictures with him, although he was immensely successful and became very rich. And we are going to see his apartment in Manhattan, which is, almost unacceptably opulent. An interesting man, though. He had a partner, and we are going to talk about both. So Thomas Hastings, born on March 11th, and that's the reason we talk about him today, born in 1860 and died in 1929. In a hospital, I guess, because of complications in an operation, while his partner died in a car accident, much younger. So Thomas Hastings was an American architect, a partner in the firm of Carrère and Hastings, active from 1885 to 1929. Let's notice here in 1885, he was 25 years old when they opened, Carrère and Hastings opened their own office. Thomas Hastings' apartment on the roof of 52 Vanderbilt Avenue, entirely planned by himself, overlooks New York's picturesque roofline from river to river. That's how I found the text about his apartment. And we are going to read and to look at pictures from a website that I found about him. Now you tell me, how many architects have such a living room today? I mean, even the most successful, it's not that they couldn't afford it. It's just that, this immersion into history and collecting, it's a different spirit. Although, he died 1 year or 2 years after Villa Savoye was built. After. So, I mean, he was 27, let's see, he was born in 1860 and Le Corbusier was born in 1887. So he was 27 years older than Le Corbusier, meaning born 27 years before Le Corbusier. But could you imagine, that in just 27 years, things could change so dramatically in architecture? Although here you look at the opulence of the living room and the collecting and the furniture and the fireplace is in contrast, almost contradiction with the roof, because the roof is done in concrete and it's rather raw, RAO. This intrigues me, the luxury, the opulence, the softness, the history of the interior, and then the much more austere ceiling and roof. Very interesting. Hastings, Thomas Hastings. Let's read a little bit about his apartment. Above, meaning the picture we just looked at, is the living room of Mr. Hastings' roof apartment. The walls of this room are plastered in uneven surface in a yellow tone. Much of the woodwork is antique fragments of carved wood. The beams of the hipped roof are concrete cast in rough planks and painted to the tone of the rest of the wood. And now, referring to the next picture, the picture below is the library of Mr. Hastings' office. On all four sides, the books go to the ceiling, and there are some beautiful bits of old woodwork shown. The furniture, as in the rest of the apartment, is antique, of course, much of it 17th century Italian, as well as a Stuart table, an 18th century Italian chair, and the quaint there is written wrongly, Savonarola chair against the wall. And this text referred to this picture. This is just the library of the architect. And this is the Savonarola chair. You know, I don't know from what century, but anyway, a different kind of architect. I mean, an architect obviously seduced by Europe. He studied at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, and he brought the fascination with history back to the United States. But this penthouse, because that's what it is, a penthouse, was on top of this, you know, very North American building. You know, you wouldn't expect, looking at the building from the outside and look at the cars, you wouldn't expect, you know, the luxurious historicist interiors that we looked at, you know, like this one or like this one. New York City. Yes, indeed. But beyond the appearance of these tall buildings, within, for those who afforded it, a great nostalgia for Europe. A nostalgia Frank Lloyd Wright didn't have, nor Louis Sullivan, who claimed that he spent many years trying to forget what he learned in school, the very same school where Thomas Hastings studied, meaning l'École des Beaux-Arts, or l'Académie des Beaux-Arts. L'École des Beaux-Arts was you know, the most important architecture school in the world then, but those with an inclination leaning towards breaking the rules didn't feel comfortable in that high school, or not, that École des Beaux-Arts. This is the plan where Thomas Hastings brought his European dreams into. An office building, a typical North American office building from that time. He was doing well, what can we say? Now, we look at a few works, they built a lot, but I only show a few works by Carrère and Hastings, and I start with the New York Public Library, very important building on the map of Manhattan, on the map of New York City. I was many times inside that building and in front of that building. But before we look at that building, let's contemplate first a picture not with Thomas Hastings, but his partner, Carrère. This was Thomas Hastings, and this was his partner. Apparently, his partner took care of the administrative tasks of the office, and the artist, so to speak, was him, Thomas Hastings, born on March 11th, 1860. So John Mervyn Carrère, he was 2 years older than Thomas Hastings, and he died in 1911, so in a car accident. So he died at 53, and Thomas Hastings died in 1929, were two of the most prominent architects of America's Gilded Age. Their firm was launched on the national stage when Henry Flagler, Standard Oil executive and railroad magnate, commissioned the pair to design 2 hotels and 2 churches in St. Augustine, Florida, from 1886 to 1890. So in 1886, Thomas Hastings was 26 years old, very young. And but through family connections, he got these commissions. And we are going to see, well, this is what Thomas Hastings wrote to John Carrère. We are going to Florida. we've got $1 million hotel to build there. I mean, you can imagine the excitement of this 25 years old man, because in 1885 he was 25 years old, you know, getting such a commission. A million, you can imagine at that time, $1 million. God, I mean, $1 million is $1 million today as well. Although for some people it might not appear to be big money, but for me it is. It's huge. But in 1885, my God, my God, I mean, you know, it was almost an infinite amount of money. So this is what they built. You see, there are carriages on the streets, no cars. Well, they did a good job. And, you know, some years later, they won the competition for the prestigious New York Public Library, which they built, which is still standing and is an important building in Manhattan. The grand lobby of the Ponce de Leon Hotel at St. Augustine by Carrère and Hastings, 1887. Look at this. I mean, you know, I maybe even Zaha Hadid would have trembled a little bit, you know, at the opulence of the interior from 1885, 1889, 1890, I don't know, 1887. I guess it pays to be an oil executive. It paid then, it pays now, and it will forever pay until we run out of oil on this earth. But amazingly, that magnate, that, you know, immensely rich client had confidence in these young people, you know, 25, 27 years old. He could have hired any architect in the world. He could have hired Frank Lloyd Wright. He was alive and kicking. And he hired these young people. In a way, very nice. So following their success, just a second, because again, I cannot read the whole. You can read in St. Augustine. Carrère was appointed chief architect of the 1891 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, bringing further recognition to the firm. The reputation was cemented by winning the competition for the New York Public Library in 1897, beating out their former employers, very famous, McKim, Madden, White. While, so you can imagine, you know, they won the competition, not their employers. While their careers blossomed, the architects maintained their relationship with Henri Flagler, the rich man who commissioned them in Florida. In 1902, Flagler engaged Carrère and Hastings to build his home in Palm Beach, Florida, and we are going to see it, named Whitehall. The 75 rooms, 100,000 square foot Beaux-Arts mansion was described by the New York Herald newspaper as more wonderful than any palace in Europe, grander and more magnificent than any other private dwelling in the world. Wow. Anyway, they had, 75 rooms. Bill Gates, in his home that he shared with his wife, I don't know if they are still together, they only had seven bedrooms, although it's a huge complex of buildings, but so 7 bedrooms, but 24 bathrooms. Bill Gates, who teaches us about saving water, had and has, maybe he still lives there, 24 bathrooms. My God, my God. Anyway, let's move forward. What is here? This is the New York Public Library that they won the competition and built. Over the course of its history, the firm of Carrère and Hastings produced some of America's finest and most notable edifices. Civic buildings, private residences, public plazas, and parks, all defined by the Beaux-Arts principles they studied in Paris. One of the firm's major contributions was in the realm of urban design, a result of Carrère's abiding interest in the Beaux-Arts City Beautiful movement. An early advocate of city planning, he designed downtown plans for Baltimore, Hartford, Cleveland, and Atlantic City. In addition to Flagler's St. Augustine hotels, Carrère and Hastings' most celebrated commissions include Flagler's Whitehall, 1902, the New York Public Library, 1911, the Henry Clay Frick Residence, 1914, and the Manhattan Bridge Approaches and Triumphal Archway, 1916. Now, I will show a few buildings by them. The New York Public Library, here it is. It's the Research Library, as it is called. A much smaller branch of the New York Public Library is across the street. My first job in New York City was actually in this building here. I didn't know then how important this building was. And behind the library is the Bryant Park. And here on the right is the famous 42nd Street. This is a historic picture, I would say, considering the snow. But I'm wrong, because I understood that this year it did snow a lot in New York City, unlike in Bucharest. A picture maybe less impressive because of the absence of the trees. So you see, the trees do matter. Here we don't see too many trees and it looks bare, but also we don't see skyscrapers and so on. We just see the New York Public Library, and not too many cars on the streets either. So it was built, this building, in 1911, so 113 years, 112 years ago. Here it is, how it is now. It's a major building, an important building in New York City. Apparently, the designer in the firm of Carrère Hastings was Thomas Hastings, whose birthday is today. And I would say it's a good building. It's a good building, and you know, even at the level of details, and we are going to see some details. The reading room, you know, very comfortable and with dignity. An old picture, easily understood as being old, considering the cars, but you know, the cars are as they are, but their number is showing signs of the car taking over our cities, New York included. Carrère and Hastings. The reading room before the arrival of the monitors, as we see them here. And here we see, I have two pictures from the studio of Carrère and Hastings. You know, drafting boards, large drafting boards, and architects drawing, and drawing again. That's what architects are good at, right? This is the plan of the library as they won the competition with. Another scene from the studio. Not too many people. And only men, of course. There were no women architects at that time. Actually, this man here on the left, he seems to might be actually Thomas Hastings. And some so-called details. I mean, look, those who oppose ornament should look again, because I don't think such things, are, fatally detrimental. Quite the opposite. I think they add something to the building. A narration, a sense of humor, a sense of, I don't know, mythology, history, even melancholia. Why not? And we have the fresco on top here, called, referring to the myth of Prometheus bringing fire to the humans. We don't think of such matters any longer, but at that time in 1911, 19 whatever, 12, 13, 14, people still valued mythology and symbolism, and maybe we could rejuvenate a little bit this art. Here it is. It was not painted by Thomas Hastings or his partner John Carrère, but it was included symbolically because, yes, besides the mythical problem with the apple that Eve received, and both her and Adam, took a bite from the apple of knowledge. Fire given to humans by Prometheus had a significant role, very significant. But what is strange, perhaps, or maybe not strange, is I learned rather late that Prometheus had a brother, and his name was Epimetheus. And in Greek, Prometheus means the one who first thinks and then he acts, while Epimetheus means the very opposite, the one who first acts and then he thinks. Also, an important difference between Prometheus and Epimetheus was that Prometheus loved the humans, but didn't care about the gods, didn't care about the plants, the animals, and the stones, while Epimetheus was the opposite. He had reverence for the gods and loved not the humans like Prometheus, but he loved plants, animals, and stones. I think Epimetheus must be reconsidered. And in a way, Epimetheus was the first ecologist, not egologist, but ecologist. Anyway, another view of this, depiction of Prometheus giving fire to the humans. Without that fire, we wouldn't be where we are today. But on the other hand, maybe a consequence of that fire is also the fact that the climate is warming and the icebergs are melting and the levels of the seas are rising. The elevation of the New York Public Library, designed by Carrère and Hastings, the great public library which is to stand in Bryant Park, New York City, fronting upon Fifth Avenue between 40th and 42nd Street, front elevation of the accepted design by Carrère and Hastings. And this is, I don't know, a funny drawing. I don't know when it was done. Anyway, the New York Public Library. Now we look at the Ponce de Leon Hotel in Florida. Very picturesque, maybe too picturesque. but Thomas Hastings wanted to create an architecture inspired by the Spanish tradition, and look at the opulence of the interior. And not everything here is bad, actually. And if there is an excess of superfluousness, and probably there is, we should not forget what Voltaire said, that the superfluous is needed, actually, sometimes. Although in an age obsessed by entertainment, maybe we have too much superfluity or superfluousness. I'm not sure if both words do exist as such, but you understand. If the superfluous took over the world, it won't be a good thing. But a certain degree of freedom and maybe even a little bit of frivolousness, sometimes maybe sometimes could be a little bit okay, maybe. Although I know I'm on a dangerous ground now stating something like this. But then, is the picturesque truly, a sinful positioning in architecture? Interesting, this illustration. The crocodile, the reptile encircling the hotel by Carrère and Hastings. Well, there are actually three reptiles now, I see. I thought it was just one, almost biting its tail like the Ouroboros. But no, there are maybe the mother and the two babies, two crocodiles. Unfortunately, crocodiles also eat humans in Florida as well. The Flagler Museum in Florida, we read about it that it was considered the most beautiful palace in the world. I don't know. The trees are beautiful indeed. The building, but the building is maybe okay too, to an extent. It's a historicist building. It's not a building that claims great originality, but it's done, I think, rather skillfully, if you accept the premise that it is a building that was not mainly interested in great originality. And the opulence is almost infuriating. I mean, you know, but the ex-president of the United States, who claims he's a modern man and a forward-looking man, he's actually, covering every square inch of his apartment in Trump Tower in gold. At least this is more discreet. But when you consider such an interior in the context where the the Ford T model was taking over the world, you wonder a little bit, It's there seems to be a level of incongruence here. Too much luxury. Now we see here gold as well, plenty of it. It's for, those oil magnates and the oil and those great capitalists who afforded so much gold. Florida. And now the Jefferson Hotel, this one has been in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, in Richmond, Virginia. Do you see cars? No, just carriages and horses. Although we do see a bicycle. This is interesting. So the bicycle that did exist at that time. No cars though, just horses and carriages with horses. But look at the interior. God, only marble, of course. We are talking here about the real thing. These columns are covered in marble. It is infuriating. The exterior is more sober. Thomas Hastings and Carrère and Hastings. We are approaching the end of this presentation, short presentation on this kind of architecture and this kind of architect. And I end the presentation with this itself kind of infuriating tower of jewels that was built for a World's Fair, and it was covered with fake jewels, meaning made of glass. And I understood when it was demolished, those pieces of glass, the so-called jewels, were sold for $1 a piece. But there were, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, or I don't know. Anyway, it was built in 1915 for the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco, California. And here it is, a tower it is. Architectural bonanza, of course. Yeah, dreaming about a world which maybe never was. But all of this was stage design, actually, built to last for a few months. That's it. In a way, it's bad because it shows that we don't believe in our dreams, and we just be like this kind of in a not truly convinced that we are only mimicking something that we don't believe in fact. Anyway, a strange architecture, really. I mean, Thomas Hastings was a skillful architect, even if maybe his aesthetical choices are too distant from ours, but he was skillful. And I wish I had other examples of his, imaginative architecture. I understood that this tower, and that's why it was called the Tower of Jewels, because at night, when everything was lit up around it, would just burn, because of those, small pieces of glass that were covering the building. 1915, San Francisco, Carrère and Hastings. Although in 1915, I think Carrère already was dead. I think he died in 1911. So at that time, probably just Thomas Hastings was in charge of their office. Architectural bonanza. And the story continues. There are World's Fairs very often in the present too, although we complain about limited resources and climate change, but human beings never learn, as Rem Koolhaas said correctly this time. At night, the Tower of Jewels, Thomas Hastings. Thank you, and happy birthday, Thomas.